You know how to hold it all together, but when it comes to your relationships, something's always missing. Welcome to Emotionally Wealthy, a podcast for high achievers who are ready to trade emotional disconnection for clarity, fulfillment, and relationships that are nourishing, not draining. I'm your host, Karen Conlon, licensed therapist, transformational coach, and your guide in turning insight into action. Are you ready for it? Let's do this. Welcome once again to the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. I'm Karen Conlon, your host, and I want to start off today's episode with asking you this. Have you ever noticed that you can talk about your feelings without actually feeling them? What I mean by that is, for example, you can explain why something hurt you, and you can even name the pattern and sound calm and reflective. And you might even sound emotionally intelligent as you're describing why something hurt you. And yet, underneath all of that beautiful, flowery language, there's a distance, there's a flatness, if you will, a certain level of disconnect from what you're describing and actually feeling. And so many people today, I think, sound emotionally fluent and yet still feel emotionally disconnected. Like they know the words, but not really the experience. They can describe the emotions, but they're struggling to stay with them or in them. And so in this episode today, we are going to be separating true emotional awareness from emotional performance. And more importantly, we're going to talk about why confusing the two really keeps people stuck in the same relational patterns, even when they believe that they're doing the work. Let's start with emotional awareness. Being emotionally aware means that you're noticing what happens internally in real time. Now, that doesn't mean that you realize it later and that means it didn't happen or that you're not emotionally aware. Sometimes this takes practice. And as a matter of fact, it is one of the things that when I had a therapy practice and in my coaching practice, I teach emotional awareness. And the difference between feeling it now and feeling it later is that we learn to be present through the practice of mindfulness. So emotional awareness does mean noticing what's happening to you internally, what your body is signaling you in real time. Also, naming your emotions while they're happening and staying connected through the felt experience. That is also what it means to be emotionally aware. So most people, I think, fall within the line of being able to say 5 or 6 emotions. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm irritated, I'm angry. So most people have their maybe top 5 emotions that they can name. But staying in them and then really being able to dig a little bit deeper and name what's actually under those underlying emotions, that is also emotional awareness, where you can stay connected to that emotion and the felt experience. So you're not describing what's happening, you're actually feeling it. The other thing about emotional awareness is that when you are emotionally aware, you are actually allowing emotions to move through your body without rushing to resolve them. This is a hard one, especially when you're dealing with anxiety or disappointment, especially if you're disappointing other people. That's a difficult thing for people to stay with. And those are things that people tend to want to rush to fix. If you can allow your emotions to just move through your body, and even if it doesn't feel good, rather than rushing to try to fix it or change how you feel, just kind of sitting in them, not only are you really practicing emotional awareness, what you're actually teaching your brain is that, yeah, this sucks. I don't like how this feels, but we can get through this, and I'm going to see you on the other side of this, and I'm going to be okay. And that's a really important lesson for your brain to learn, especially if that emotion that you're having trouble sitting with is anxiety or anxiety related. The other part of emotional awareness or being emotionally aware is being able to tolerate that discomfort that I was just talking about long enough for some clarity to emerge. And I'm really excited to talk about this little piece. Most people try to avoid the discomfort of a conversation or even of a thought because the emotions that come to them, even just thinking about it, not even doing the thing, are so difficult to tolerate that they start avoiding or denying or dismissing or minimizing, usually at your own expense, by the way, or at their own expense. And so if you can tolerate the discomfort long enough for you to move through it, let it move past your body and through your body, I promise you that you will have some more clarity emerge from that experience. And that clarity oftentimes comes with a revelation or some clarity about next steps or some clarity about choices that you didn't even imagine you had. But you must allow yourself to sit in the discomfort of that feeling so that you can have clarity come through. I'm not saying that that is a guarantee that's going to happen every single time, but in my experience, when you start practicing these things that I've just mentioned around awareness, and especially sitting with the discomfort and really dealing with the distress tolerance of it all, you really come out on the other end with some amazing insight. Now, emotional performance, how do you know if you are being emotionally performative? When you are being emotionally performative, you are talking about emotions in a very polished way. Usually it's a very controlled way, and more than likely in a very intellectualized way. Like you are explaining that emotion and saying, well, it makes sense. And, this is what I was feeling. And, really being able to talk about it in a calm way. Now, I'm not saying that you can't talk about emotions in a calm way. Just because you're experiencing emotions doesn't mean that you're going to lose it. But what I am saying is that when you are emotionally performing, you are typically not really feeling the feels. And when you're not feeling the feels, there is a certain amount of poise that and a way of articulating these things that you have that you maybe don't have as much as when you're feeling the feels and talking about it and connected to your body when you're feeling these emotions. The other thing too about emotional performance is that you are explaining feelings instead of experiencing them. And that also allows you to a certain degree to really stay very calm and regulated because you're actually staying distant. So what is kind of the bottom line here is that when you are emotionally performing, you're you're coming at emotions rather from a very intellectual and sort of cognitive and rational place. And the insight that you are maybe talking about is really formulated to protect you from rejection or from disappointment or from maybe people seeing you as weak, because maybe that's one of the things that you associate with having emotions or expressing emotions. Now, why does emotional performance develop in us? So oftentimes it's because it's rewarded. It's rewarded in childhood. Think about when we're kids, we are rewarded or acknowledged for being composed and insightful and mature, which is a great thing for kids to have. But realistically, kids are kids. And A lot of times that composure and that insight and that maturity doesn't come until much later. And so when children behave a certain way and then that takes notice or gets noticed, and they're getting positive reinforcement for that behavior, well, they start to make the connection and say, oh, okay, well, this is what gets me some really good attention here. This is what makes me look better than my brother or the other kids in class or whatever it is. And so there's a memory of that, and there's a really good feeling that is attached to that. The problem is that when you start learning to function in that way and relate in that way, and it doesn't change as time goes by, then that can spill over into your adult relationships. And so what served you in that moment or during childhood may no longer serve you as an adult in your adult relationships. The other reason as to why emotional performance develops is that, well, you may have been raised in a family where certain emotions are inconvenient or they're overwhelming to a parent or to the household, or perhaps having a certain emotion could be unsafe in some environments. And so instead of addressing or allowing ourselves to feel sad, mad, glad, tantrum, whatever it is that, kids do at different ages, they learn. And, this is a very sort of primal survival skill. It's not something they think about or formulate. It's something that happens very instinctually, if you will. They learn to repress certain emotions that are not allowed or tolerated or looked down upon in the household or in the environment that they're growing up in. And so then again, that also is something that comes along later, thinking that thinking becomes safer than feeling. And so we think about things, we don't feel things. We can explain things, but we don't have to feel them, because feeling them comes with a lot of potential consequences. The other reason that emotional performance sometimes develops in us is because we understand if we can replace the experience with an explanation, then we don't have to feel it. The truth is that we always feel things, and we may learn to repress things. We may learn to compartmentalize. We might learn to minimize. But at the end of the day, understanding replaces experiencing it, but not for long, because we have emotions for a reason. Emotions are signals to us, and you can only ignore signals for so long. The body will express what the mind cannot. And oftentimes what I have seen is that it comes, of course, in forms of mental illness or mental stress or mental health issues or physiological issues, illnesses, and things of the sort. GI issues is a big area as well, where, the repression of feelings and minimizing and all these things comes up for so many people. Now, why does it matter, right? Like, why does it matter whether you're emotionally aware or emotionally performing? Well, it matters because emotional performance can look like growth because you're able to talk about things very articulately and very intelligently and explain all the things. So it can look like growth, but it's still blocking you from fully, genuinely, and authentically connecting with others. That's an important piece of why it's important for you to consider whether you are emotionally aware or emotionally performing. Relationships also, they require a felt presence, not just insight. So having insight into a relationship is great and useful. But if you're going to be in a relationship with someone, you have to be present. You have to feel that presence. You have to be able to feel the other person's energy, and maybe be able to have that eye to eye contact, or even if it's not eye to eye contact, but be able to feel yourself in the relationship and be able to empathize or be attuned to their emotions and their feelings. So, relationships require presence. And when you are emotionally performing, that's not really possible to do. And the other thing too about why this matters is that without embodiment patterns, they just repeat even where you're aware. Maybe you are aware that you're performing, but if you're not embodying your emotions, if you're not feeling your emotions, then the same patterns, even the ones that you want to change, the ones that are not good for you, the ones that are, yes, you acknowledge are not working for you, that is going to be really difficult to change, because even when you are aware, if you're not allowing yourself to feel and experience what your emotions are trying to tell you, it's going to be really, really difficult to change any patterns, because you really have to be in tune with your emotions in order to do that. So for today, I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight and some points for reflecting about whether you are emotionally aware or emotionally performing. And I'm going to leave you with some reflection questions for you to think about. And if you can't write them down now, if you're driving or busy, it's okay. We will have them in the show notes. You can come back to this episode. You can save it, come back to it. I really want to invite you to think about these, maybe even journal, jot down some notes, and see what comes up for you as you ask yourself these questions. The first thing is, ask yourself, do I describe emotions more fluently than I feel them? I can't tell you the amount of times that in a therapy session, I've asked a client, how do you feel about that? And I get a response of, well, I think that, and I'll come back and say, well, I'm glad that you are thinking about that, and I want to come back to that, but I'm wondering how you actually feel. And people are stumped. They're really, really stumped, because when they're used to responding from a place of cognition and intellectualizing, it is really difficult a lot of times for them to actually feel their emotions and know what they're feeling, because they're very used to describing. So that's the first question, is, do I describe emotions more fluently than I feel them? The next question is, when I talk about painful experiences, do I stay emotionally present or do I go flat? That's another really important one, because that one has to do with what happens to my body. Our bodies sometimes dissociate, and it doesn't mean that you're out of it when your body, or you dissociate. You can be present, you can be there, but when there are painful things, sometimes our brains are always trying to protect us. And so sometimes our brains go into that protection mode by really just numbing things down. So that's another question for you to ask yourself, is, when I'm talking about painful experiences or painful things, do I stay emotionally present or do I go flat? The next question that I encourage you to ask yourself is, do I move quickly into understanding, meaning making, or fixing? In other words, when somebody asks me how I'm feeling, or if I'm having a certain emotion about something, do I want to just rush to, okay, let me make sense of this? And what does it really mean? And how do I change that? Because again, you are trying to deal with an emotional question, emotional situation, with a very practical response. And that may work sometimes, but after a while, your body will continue to let you know that something is off. Now, you may choose to ignore it, but if you're really looking to become more emotionally aware, then this is something for you to consider and to think about. The next question is, how comfortable am I sitting with emotion without resolving it? And again, that's very tied to what I just talked about, moving quickly into understanding. But this is different, because this is really you asking yourself, okay, so as I'm sitting with this, how much can I tolerate? How comfortable or uncomfortable am I just sitting with this emotion before I feel the anxiety or the urgency to go resolve it or find a resolution for it. So that's another question that can help bring you clarity. And it can also let you know, really, is this an issue that I maybe need to address? And the last question here is asking yourself, when was the last time that I paused to notice a sensation in my body before explaining it? In other words, instead of just saying, oh, my stomach hurts, or, oh, I'm sweating, really sitting with that and noticing that sensation and just seeing what happens. Maybe really allowing yourself to see, how long does this take to go through me? And I'm not suggesting that you take out a watch or your phone and start timing it. What I'm saying is just allowing yourself to sit there, pause, notice what the sensation is feeling like as it moves through your body, instead of trying to explain it or explain it away right away. The one thing that I really want to leave you with, though, as you ask yourself these questions, my friends, is that this is not about self-criticism. These questions are not meant for you to then take them and be judgmental and unkind to yourself. These questions are about helping you to move into more or lean into more self-awareness in a gentle way by simple question asking and reflection and tuning into yourself. Again, just remember that emotional performance can sound like growth, but still keep you disconnected. And you really can't heal what you can only intellectualize. If you're constantly trying to explain things away and intellectualize, it's like putting a Band-Aid over a wound that needs a different treatment. And so before you can fix things, you need to feel them. So the next time that you are feeling something and you want to just kind of go towards emotional performance, and that is what you do, I want to encourage you to just stop and pause and remember that emotional wealth and emotional awareness is built through presence, not polish. You don't need to fix things right away. You don't need to explain things right away. You only need to notice them. Thank you so much for being here. If this episode resonated with you, if it gave you insight, please save it, share it, and until next time, I encourage you to stay curious, stay connected, and stay emotionally wealthy. I'll see you next time. Oh, hey, quick reminder for you that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified professional with any questions you might have.